Hi, in this video I'm going to look at the factors that beginners should be looking at when they're trying to decide which army to play. There are four main armies in Flames of War. You have America, Germany, Britain, and Russia. Each army has distinct advantages and play styles. Choosing one must depend on certain questions. What era do you want to play? How much money are you willing to put into this army? How many models are you willing to paint? What kind of army do you want to play? What is your playstyle? So looking at the first question, what era do you want to play? There's really only two. We have mid-war and late war. Technically there's early war, but nobody's playing it right now because the company said that they're not going to be making books for early war. I hope they change that, but honestly, when we played early war, the armies were, it was difficult to play and the game didn't flow as well. They've made the rules mainly to deal with the mid and late war armies, so the rules are basically for those two. So just so that you know, mid-war is basically 1942 to 1943, and late war is 1944 to 1945. But you'll notice that there's even eras within that, but for some reason, the company has broken the game into two games, basically. So if you buy a mid-war book and go to a late war tournament, it won't work. So this is something that you need to kind of decide, depending on your army, of which era you want to play. You know, if your group wants to play mid-war, then you know you're going to look at a mid-war army. If it's a late war group, good, you're good to go. But if you're going to go into tournaments, which they rotate the mid-war and late war every year, then you're going to have a little bit of a problem. So depending on the army. So we'll get into that. Depending on which army you get, you'll have an easier time or a harder time um, adapting to the different era. And another big question, how much money are you willing to put into this army? Germany is probably the best. If you don't want to put much money into it, um, Germany, you can get away with um, not putting a lot of money into a German army. This goes across all of the eras, armies. It's very hard to find an army that's very big for Germany. Britain is kind of on that spectrum on the German side. They can make their armies bigger, but for the most part, they are also kind of an elite army. Not so much as Germans. Their equipment is not quite as heavy, so they don't have to spend as many points on it, but they still are in that category of elite. Now, America, generally speaking, especially in mid-war, you're going to be dealing with a bigger army, but because their equipment is pretty good and they have very good tactics, America tends to be on the larger side of an army. You're going to spend more money on them, um, but that can be worked around depending on what your philosophy is. Uh, it is very easy to make you know to get a lot of bang out of your buck with America. So I'm wondering if I should have switched America and Britain. It really just does depend on what kind of army you're going to make. And then Russia, yeah, if you got plenty of money, Russia's your country because um, they have huge armies, and so if you've got plenty of money, you're not going to worry about being a Russian player. The next question, how many models are you willing to paint? Well, if you're not big into painting as I was when I first started, you're not going to want to have a lot of models or complicated models in order to model and then paint. You're a player. You just want to play. So again, Germany is at the top of the list because hey, if you have a low model count, you have few things on the board to play with, less things you bought, less things to paint. Britain, again, they're very simple way to paint them. They pretty much have the same color for their uniforms, for their tanks. Um, so yeah, you can get away with, their tanks tend to be very good and easy to paint. America also pretty easy to paint, but they will tend to have more tanks usually than Britain, depending on what kind of army you have. So Britain and America is in the same category. We're in that medium range, and then Russia, of course. You're going to have swarms of things to paint. So if you love to paint, you got all that money and you got all those models, you're going to really enjoy painting them up. All right, so the next one, what kind of army do you want to play? Do you want a shooty army, one that's going to blast away at people and take shots at them and blow them up using your long-range weapons? Do you want an assaulting army, one that's going to get into the opponent's face and take them out and just murder your opponents? Because assaulting is the best way to take things off the board. But it is very difficult. That's a difficult tactic to pull off. It does take some skill. Combined arms. Do you like using different weapons, tanks, artillery, infantry, planes, whatever, bringing different types of units to the game? Do you want a swarm army where you're just going to human wave somebody to death? Do you want a discipline army, one that's going to stay on the board, one that's going to when you give it a command, they're gonna successfully dig in or make a blitz move. Do you want an army that's a jack of all trades? I call it the Batman army, where they can handle anything that comes at it. They've got a tool for everything. They can beat infantry, they can beat tanks, they can beat artillery. They're gonna be able to handle just about everything. Do you want an army that's great at taking out tanks, infantry? These are, things that you're going to want to look at. I mean, if you're a certain type of player, you want to make sure you bust every tank, and you're going to be looking for that type of army. And you want to deal with your friend's going to bring swarms of Russian infantry, and you're going to want to look for an army that's anti-infantry. All right, so what's your play style? You're the type of player who likes to sit back and wait. You set your guys, put them in trenches. You have good fields of fire, and that's what's going. That is the type of game you would like to play. You feel most comfortable with. Do you want to rain down destruction from afar? You want to use your artillery, your planes, things that where the other opponent's like, man, that's just not fair that you're able to do that, and I can't even get to you. Do you want to blitz with tanks? You want to just take your tanks and just mow down your opponent, just go right through them like they're not even there? Human wave, where you just send one unit after another until the other side just doesn't have enough bullets to keep up with your guys. So let's take a look at the big four, and starting with America. They are a combined arms army. Okay, that Batman army that I talked about, they're going to they're really good at using infantry, tanks, artillery, planes, all these things together. So teamwork is very important for the Americans, and then that goes along with the crisscrossiness of their units. So what I mean by that is that their tanks are not going to do very well against like German tanks, okay? They don't have the best tanks, but they use their tanks to go after infantry usually. They'll use their tank destroyers to take out tanks. They'll use their artillery to take out infantry. They'll use their infantry to take out tanks or artillery. They'll mismatch people much better than other armies usually. So, you don't want as an American, usually you don't want your infantry going up against somebody else's infantry. You want to use heavy weapons or artillery doing that. And so they're very good at crisscrossing the units and not matching up infantry versus infantry, tank versus tank, artillery versus artillery. Well, their artillery is the best, but Yeah, so they are very, very versatile, both in the units and areas. And what I mean by that is that um, probably the best model to get is the Sherman tank. Sherman tank can be used for so many things. I mean, the British used them, the Americans used them in mid-war, late war. Is one of the reasons why I started with an American army is because I got the Sherman tank and I knew it was going to be good for both eras, and I didn't know which tournaments I'd be attending, so I didn't want to be left out of a tournament. So they're 105s. Infantry usually can pass along from one era to another. And since they really don't rely on anti-tank guns, they rely on their bazookas, which you're going to have in mid and late war. They rely on Shermans, which are going to be around all the time. They're just omnipresent everywhere. So if you go with America, you can expect, as long as you take the Shermans, even Stuarts, infantry, 105s or priests, um, some planes, you're going to be able to use them in most mid-war and late-war armies, especially the ones that are out now. Very, very versatile models. Also, very versatile units. Like I said, they usually like to crisscross, but I mean their tanks can handle uh, other tanks. They're no slouches or anything. So they're good at doing pretty much everything. They're just not great at doing everything. And that's why you do want to crisscross your units for the most part. Now for the Germans, they're a very shooty army. They're very good at, they have the best anti-tank guns. They'll hit you from far away. Um, and they've got the Blitzkrieg or the Blitz move. Actually, it's Stormtrooper. It's where they can pop out, shoot at you, and then duck behind a building or a forest before you get a chance to shoot at them. So they like to play at range. So if you're the type of player that likes to sit back and shoot at people and whittle them down before they get to you, that's basically what the Germans. It's a very patient army. They have the lowest model count usually. Depending on the army, but for the most part, you can count on the Germans having a low model count. Just small groups of infantry, small groups of tanks. You're going to have to be very discriminate of what you're going to bring to your army. But that's good because then you don't have to paint as much, you don't have to buy as much. So, but that's going to be a weakness on the board. However, their units are very, very powerful. Okay, they are the opposite of the Americans. They like matching up their tanks against your tanks. Okay, Panzer IV has an advantage over a Sherman tank. Slight advantage, but they still do. And plus, they got Panthers and Tigers and King Tigers in late war. They're going to put a hurt on the opposing tanks, and that's not to mention their 88s. There's 7.5 anti-tank weapons. Still have very good artillery and infantry because they're always veteran. They're always going to be very reliable in battle. So you can count on those troops to do what you want them to do. Um, and they're going to put a hurting on. It's just that they don't have usually a lot of guns. So it's an unforgiving army. You make mistakes, you put things in the wrong place, you go after the wrong units. Um, yeah, you're going to suffer. So if you're a good player, if you really know what you're doing, then the Germans are a very, very tough army to beat. However, your mistakes will get magnified in the game because of your very low model count. So if you do something wrong, you're going to pay for it. And as I said before, they got the best anti-tank weapons: 88s, 77.5s. Uh, the 88 is on the Tiger. They got Panther, Panzer IV. Just awesome guns on their tanks and anti-tank guns. Oh, not to mention the best mechanized infantry. If you like putting your troops into half tracks, the Germans are for you, and that's no exaggeration. Um, it's not even close. as far as mechanized infantry, if you like mechanized infantry, that's your deal, then absolutely don't even think about it. Go with the German army. They got great tanks, of course, but the mechanized infantry is what sets them apart. So if you like, some tanks and you blitz with your mechanized infantry, trust me, you're going to have a lot of fun with this army. Now with Britain, they're great assaulters. They're the ones that are going to get in your face. In fact, they have some units that have night fighting ability that you can get. So even if you have an infantry army, you can move in close, get in their face, and then assault them. So they are really, really good. And these are the regular troops. It's not even like commandos or anything, but they pretty much fight like commandos when it comes to hand to hand. So, and I would say they're even better than the Germans at that. Um, it can be an elite army. They've got a lot of really good commandos and airborne troops and so forth. Um, Excellent tanks, Churchills, Cromwells. Again the Shermans. So they've got they they're going to cost a lot of points. So their model counts is also going to be fairly low, but they're not quite to the level of the Germans. Um, the problem with the British is that they have a lot of different types of tanks that they use, and the Russians also run into this problem. But Britain, because they usually are a smaller army, you're going to be getting a unit of this tank, and then you say, oh, well, I want that tank, and then so you're probably going to get a lot of different tanks, especially between the eras. When mid-war started, you got Stuarts or Crusaders and Grants, and then as they went into Armored Fist, then the Shermans came into play and the Churchills, and then we go into late war, they get Cromwells. So there's a lot of different tanks. So that diversity is good if you like variety, but it's not very good if you want to um, play a lot of different armies. So those models don't usually cross over very well. Um, but if you like building and painting tanks, Britain's going to be a good army for you. All right, now their infantry is, I would say they probably have the best infantry and the second best artillery. And it's not because their artillery is very powerful. I mean, I'm a big fan of the 25 pounder. And the reason why I am is because it is an excellent anti-tank weapon as well as an artillery piece. The 105s and the 10.5 centimeter for the Germans, they're going to be better than a 25 pounder. However, if somebody tries to attack your guns, with tanks, the 25 pounders are enough of a deterrent to keep Panzer IVs, Panthers, pretty much anything but a Tiger or KV or an IS coming at you. You're going to be safe with those 25 pounders. They shoot in a 360-degree angle, unlike the most artillery, and they get two shots when they're just sitting there instead of the one shot that the other guns get. So they're in between an anti-tank and an artillery, so they're very versatile, and I'm a big fan of the 25 pounders. Their problem that I've seen is that they don't stick well in a fight, especially their tanks. They tend to run off the board, so they can be very fragile. They got small units. You whittle them down faster than the other countries, and then uh, they're sometimes even reluctant when it comes to staying in a fight. So their tanks tend to run away, and so they're not very reliable. But they are very good troops otherwise. Okay, now for the Soviets. Very high model count. You're going to be painting and buying a lot of things for the Soviets. But that means that their tactics are going to be about swarming. You're just going to come in and just overwhelm people. Um, I would think it's a very forgiving army because you lose one or a bunch of stands, you got plenty to back yourself up. So you can make mistakes and still win as the Soviets. I think it's a really good beginner army for playing, not for modeling and painting and so forth. It's going to take you a while to put it together. But if you do have the army already set up, or you bought an army that somebody already painted for you, then it's I think a good beginner army. It's just getting it started is the problem. They also have a very versatile model. In fact, I would say it's even more versatile than the Sherman, and that's a T-34. And if you look at the plastic models that Battlefront gives you, they give you both the regular T-34 turret and the T-34-85. So you can play in the mid-war with your T-34 and late war. They both, in fact, it goes from the early war all the way to the late war. It's such a versatile model. But because you can put um, that 85 millimeter gun on there, because it's a separate turret, you just pop off one turret, put on the other. Now you've got a late war excellent tank, and they're terrific tanks. Um, very tough to deal with, and that's my next point is that the Soviets really do have the best tanks. If when I go through looking at the tanks, they have terrific armor. They're fast. The T-34s are very fast. Um, they can still do a lot of damage, especially T-30-45. And then you get the KVs and KV-1, KV-1S in mid-war, and then you're going to get the IS and late war. And they are beasts. I would say they're better than the German tank, going toe-to-toe, mano-a-mano. As their problem is that they have the worst troops. Now they stick in a fight. They're good at, they're fearless a lot of times, especially with certain rules that they have. But they're not very skillful. They get hit easy. Some of their troops die very quickly, so you're going to have to be prepared to take casualties. If you don't mind seeing stands disappearing, your infantry just melt away and your tanks get blown up and so forth, if you're okay seeing that kind of carnage for your army, knowing that it's okay, you got plenty behind it to keep going through, and as long as you don't mind taking casualties like that, you're going to win a lot of games. And that's why I think it's a good beginner army. All right, so final thoughts. No matter what you choose, if you have a main idea of what you're trying to accomplish with your army, you and your army will morph into something that you're really going to enjoy. So for instance, when I started my American army, I just wanted to be a versatile model count army where I could buy a couple things and I can go to any tournament and still get to play. And then when I started realizing their tactics of combined arms and how to, match up properly, I really enjoyed the army and I had a lot of fun with it. So um, that goes to my next point. Stick to that army. You pick an army, stay with it, even if it's not something that you thought it was going to be. It's not quite as enjoyable as you thought. Hang with it. You're gonna learn the tactics, and the more you play with it, the better off you're going to be. And by doing so, you're gonna have a lot of fun. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.